Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
If you're joining us, it means you are probably looking to, cut through the noise. We all know how exhausting the 24/7 news cycle is right now.
Oh, absolutely. It's deafening.
It is. It's overwhelming, it's loud, and frankly, it rarely gives you the historical or strategic context you actually need to understand what's happening. So we are bypassing the talking heads today.
Which is much needed.
Right. We're stepping back to look at a highly curated, meticulously detailed stack of materials concerning one of the most volatile, world-altering geopolitical shifts of the 21st century.
And the sheer volume of data we have to synthesize today is, it's staggering. But that's the entire point of this exercise. We are taking that noise and distilling it down into the anatomy of a crisis.
Exactly. So our sources for this deep dive are uniquely comprehensive. First, we have an exhaustive historical timeline.
Day by day.
Day by day, tracking the diplomatic labyrinth of the 2025 and 2026 negotiations between Iran and the United States.
Meeting by meeting.
Meeting by meeting, yeah. Second, we have a deeply analytical policy paper from the INSS.
That's the Institute for National Security Studies.
Right, dated July 2025. And this paper assesses the direct physical fallout of what became known as the 12-Day War.
A crucial document.
It really is. Third, we're drawing from a sociological and geopolitical essay that explores the psychological implications of assassinating a nation's sovereign leader.
Which directly tackles the question everyone has been asking. Are we looking at World War III?
A big question. And finally, we have a minute-by-minute live news blog from The Guardian, dated March 1st, 2026. This captures the visceral chaos of unprecedented military strikes as they were actually happening on the ground.
Put all this together, and you have a roadmap of escalation.
A terrifying roadmap. Our mission today is to take you inside that roadmap. We want to unpack exactly how a series of diplomatic negotiations, which, they were genuinely aimed at preventing nuclear proliferation, how they somehow rapidly deteriorated into a devastating regional war.
A war that ultimately culminated in the shocking assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Yeah. We're going to track the missed signals, the shifting red lines, and the tactical decisions that brought the entire world to the brink.
But before we get into the timeline, we really need to set the parameters for this discussion.
Yes, very important.
We are dealing with highly sensitive, deeply polarizing, and intensely politically charged events. These materials cover actions and viewpoints involving both left-wing and right-wing international actors across multiple nations.
Right.
So it is vital to emphasize to you, the listener, that this deep dive takes absolutely no sides. We are not here to endorse any political faction, any military action, or any ideological viewpoint.
Not at all.
Our goal is purely analytical. We are here to synthesize the facts, examine the strategic calculations of the players involved, and impartially convey the ideas and events exactly as they are contained in the original source materials.
We are just your guides through the raw data. So let's jump right into the spring of 2025. The inciting incident here is a letter.
Specifically, Donald Trump's March 2025 letter to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
And this wasn't your standard diplomatic cable, filed quietly through Swiss intermediaries.
No, not at all.
It was a stark, aggressive ultimatum. The letter demanded that Iran fully dismantle its nuclear program within 60 days.
60 days, a very short window.
Very short. And if they didn't, they would face severe military consequences and a total reduction of their oil exports to zero.
Basically, it was a revived maximum pressure campaign.
But put on steroids.
Right. And the immediate internal reaction within Iran is where this story actually begins. Because initially, Khamenei publicly dismissed the letter.
You went on state television, right?
Yeah, went on TV, called it bullying, and indicated that Iran would never bow to that kind of overt military threat.
Which makes sense for them.
It does, historically. The Islamic Republic's core doctrine is built entirely on resistance to Western pressure. Yielding to a public ultimatum is traditionally seen as projecting fatal weakness.
But then, and this is the fascinating part, they reverse course.
They do.
By the end of March 2025, the Iranian leadership actually sends a reply expressing a readiness to enter nuclear negotiations.
Which was a shock to a lot of observers.
Right, because why the sudden pivot? If resistance is their entire brand, why blink?
It really came down to a cold, hard assessment of regime survival. Behind closed doors, Khamenei's top advisors were sounding the alarm.
You have to look at the broader context of Iran at that exact moment in early 2025.
Exactly. The country was facing a crippling systemic economic crisis, Inflation was soaring.
The currency was virtually worthless on the black market.
And daily rolling blackouts were plunging massive cities like Tehran into darkness simply because of electricity shortages.
But put yourself in the shoes of an average citizen in Tehran for a second. Your money buys half of what it did a month ago. The power grid is failing, and now the government is publicly daring a global superpower to bomb you.
The domestic tension must have been completely suffocating. So the advisors warned Khamenei that absorbing a massive military strike while the domestic economy was already collapsing, that could be the breaking point.
It could literally bring down the regime from the inside out through sheer civil collapse.
They realized the threat from Washington wasn't a bluff, and their domestic foundation was simply too brittle to withstand the shock of a war.
So survival instincts kick in.
They always do.
And that brings us to April 12, 2025. The diplomatic machinery grinds to life in Muscat, Oman. And I want to paint the picture of this for you, the listener, because the optics are just so telling.
Oh, the setup in Oman is incredible.
You have this intense, indirect negotiation setup at the Al Alam Palace. On the U.S. side, you have Special Envoy Steve Witkoff.
Right.
On the Iranian side, Foreign Minister Abbas Araki. But they aren't sitting across a mahogany table hammering out details.
Yep.
They're sitting in completely separate rooms. Omani mediators, including Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi, are literally ferrying pieces of paper back and forth down the palace halls.
It's the ultimate manifestation of mutual distrust.
Yeah.
They are negotiating the fate of the Middle East, but they refuse to even share the same physical space. The Omanis are acting as human firewalls.
Human firewalls, that's a good way to put it.
And yet, despite that bizarre, kind of clunky dynamic, the proposals flying down those hallways were incredibly substantive.
The counteroffers that pass through those mediators are fascinating. Iran proposes a three-step plan. First, they would temporarily lower their uranium enrichment to 3.67%.
Which is the old civilian energy baseline.
Right, in exchange for access to frozen assets and the ability to export oil. Second, they'd permanently halt high-level enrichment and allow surprise IAEA inspections if the U.S. lifted all sanctions and stopped Europe from snapping back UN sanctions.
And the third step.
The third step was the U.S. Congress would officially approve the deal, and Iran would ship its highly enriched uranium to a third country.
That proposal was a massive concession from the Iranian baseline. Reportedly, U.S. Envoy Witkoff actually welcomed the initial framework.
Which stunned the Iranian delegation.
Completely stunned them. They expected immediate rejection. But you have to remember how delicate this was. Both sides were testing the waters, throwing out wild swing propositions to see what would stick.
Like the canceled speech.
Oh, the speech.
When I saw this detail in the timeline, it completely stopped me in my tracks.
It's wild.
Arachi had prepared a speech for the Carnegie International Nuclear Policy Conference, a speech he ultimately never gave. But in it, he was going to offer to help revive the struggling U.S. nuclear sector by having Iran build 19 reactors for America.
19 reactors. It changes the entire dynamic of who is holding the leverage, doesn't it?
I mean, does it? Or is it just high-level diplomatic trolling?
That's the question.
Iran offering to build 19 nuclear reactors for the United States feels like a calculated media strategy to make the U.S. look unreasonable. Like, hey, look how peaceful we are. We'll even fix your power grid.
Yeah, it's likely a mix of both. It's a rhetorical flex meant to highlight their technological sovereignty while simultaneously mocking Western anxieties about their capabilities.
Right.
But while those creative, slightly absurd offers were floating around Oman, the reality back in Washington was hardening. U.S. lawmakers, particularly a group of Senate Republicans, were demanding a strict 123 agreement.
For you listening, a 123 agreement is a U.S. framework for peaceful nuclear cooperation.
But applying it to Iran is highly unusual.
Why is that?
Because a 123 agreement requires massive safeguards and full dismantlement before any cooperation can even begin.
Okay.
Think of it like this. It's like asking a guy with a long documented history of insurance fraud to hand over the keys, the title, and the engine of his car before you'll even discuss giving him a ride.
That's a great analogy.
It's designed for partners you trust implicitly, not nations with a long history of violating International Atomic Energy Agency rules. Applying a 123 agreement to Iran was essentially demanding the total capitulation of their entire nuclear infrastructure up front.
So the gap between capping enrichment at 3.67% and totally dismantling the infrastructure?
It was a chasm they just couldn't bridge.
And while they're failing to bridge that chasm, a completely different kind of crisis derails the momentum.
Out of nowhere.
Right. It's early May 2025, and reports leaked that Trump is planning to officially rename the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Gulf, or Gulf of Arabia, during an upcoming trip to Saudi Arabia.
Seems like a mere semantic issue to an outside observer, right?
Yeah.
Line on a map.
Yeah, exactly.
But in geopolitics, geography and nomenclature are deeply tied to national identity. The term Persian Gulf traces back over 2.5 millennia. It is a point of profound cultural and historical pride for Iranians.
But to risk blowing up nuclear negotiations over a name? I mean, really?
You have to understand the internal politics. This triggered massive condemnation across the entire Iranian political spectrum. It unified hardliners, reformists, and regular citizens who otherwise hated the regime in rare absolute agreement. The Iranian government viewed it as a direct insult and a provocation meant to publicly humiliate them while they were sitting at the negotiating table. High-stakes diplomacy isn't just about centrifuges and sanctions, it's heavily influenced by nationalism and cultural respect.
Ultimately, Trump walked it back, saying he didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and no official announcement was made.
But they sidestepped the naming controversy, and the damage is done.
Yeah, the damage is done. And as we move into May 2025, you can actually see the trust evaporating in real time as the U.S. shifts the goalposts. The talk moves away from merely capping enrichment levels.
Right. Envoy Witkoff states clearly that Iran must completely and permanently dismantle its uranium enrichment facilities at Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan.
Total dismantlement.
Total dismantlement, which was the absolute red line for Iran. Supreme Leader Khamenei publicly called the demand excessive and outrageous.
Of course.
Uranium enrichment was the crown jewel of their scientific program. Giving it up completely was non-negotiable. And this diplomatic stalemate was suddenly exacerbated by a massive media bombshell.
The information war kicks into high gear here. On May 9, Fox News releases a report featuring satellite imagery of an alleged, previously unknown Iranian nuclear weapons facility in the Semnan province.
The Rainbow Site.
They called it the Rainbow Site. According to the report, this was a massive 2,500-acre facility that had been operating for over a decade under the cover of a chemical company called Diba Energy Siba.
And the crucial detail in that report wasn't just the size of the facility, it was the allegation of tritium extraction.
Let's break that down, because tritium is one of those words that sounds scary but really needs context.
Right. Tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen. It has almost no civilian or commercial applications of consequence. But in a nuclear weapons program, it is critical.
How so?
Tritium is used to boost the yield and efficiency of a nuclear warhead. If uranium is the engine of a nuclear bomb, tritium is a turbocharger.
Ah.
So if Iran was extracting tritium at a secret 2,500-acre site, it meant they weren't just enriching uranium to build diplomatic leverage, they were actively engineering a deliverable weapon.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Arachi furiously dismissed the report.
Naturally.
He called it fabricated, Israeli-driven propaganda, purposefully designed by groups like the exiled National Council of Resistance of Iran to blow up the negotiations.
He claimed the satellite photos were deliberately misinterpreted.
But the seed of doubt was planted, and the pressure on the international community to act reached a boiling point.
Which brings us to June 12th, 2025.
The deadline.
The IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog, officially declared Iran in non-compliance with its non-proliferation obligations.
And this was the first time in 20 years that the IAEA made a formal finding of non-compliance. What pushed them over the edge? Was it the Rainbow Site?
The Rainbow Site added political pressure, sure, but the IAEA's mandate is technical. They cited Iran's repeated failure to explain undeclared nuclear materials found at various legacy sites.
Okay.
Furthermore, they reported that Iran had amassed an unprecedented stockpile of military-grade, highly enriched uranium.
Let's clarify what military-grade means in this context, because the percentages really matter here.
They do. Civilian power plants run on uranium, enriched to about 3 to 5%.
Huh.
Medical research might need 20%.
Right.
Iran was enriching to 60%.
60%.
Now, weapon grade is technically 90%. But the physics of enrichment are non-linear. Going from 3% to 60% takes a massive amount of time and effort. Going from 60% to 90% is a very short sprint.
A very short sprint.
There was no longer any credible civilian justification for holding a massive stockpile of 60% enriched material.
So if you're keeping track of the timeline, remember that 60-day ultimatum from Trump's letter back in March. We are now in mid-June. The 60 days have expired.
The diplomatic window didn't just close, it shattered.
Shattered. The failure of the diplomatic track automatically triggered the military contingency.
And that brings us to Operation Rising Lion.
And the 12-day war. From June 13 to June 24, 2025, Israel, followed shortly by the United States, launches a massive coordinated series of military strikes across Iran.
And the July 2025 policy paper from the INSS provides an incredibly granular post-war damage assessment of these strikes.
Let's walk through that.
The strikes methodically targeted the three main pillars of Iran's enrichment program. First, Natanz, which is their primary enrichment plant. When the dust settled at Natanz, they found roughly 15,000 centrifuges utterly destroyed.
15,000.
They wiped out both the older first-generation models and the advanced, highly efficient machines.
And then there's Fordo. For context, Fordo was built deep inside a mountain, specifically to protect it from airstrikes. You can't just drop standard munitions on it.
No.
The U.S. had to use massive ordnance penetrators.
MOP is a 30,000-pound bunker buster bomb.
30,000 pounds.
Yeah. It's designed to burrow through up to 200 feet of reinforced concrete and earth before detonating. The INSS notes 6 of these hit Fordo, severely crippling a site that was actively enriching uranium to 60%.
Next, they hit the Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center. This facility is the bottleneck of the whole process. It converts yellowcake uranium into UF6 gas, which is what you feed into the centrifuges to enrich it.
Right.
Then it converts the enriched gas back into metal to machine a weapon core. Isfahan was rendered totally inoperable. They also heavily damaged the heavy water reactor at Iraq, effectively closing off Iran's plutonium pathway to a bomb.
The physical infrastructure was devastated, but the human cost was equally catastrophic for their program. Over 10 top nuclear scientists and key military leaders were killed.
The INSS notes this wasn't just about destroying metal tubes.
It was about destroying the intellectual capital, the human hard drive of the nuclear program.
But the ultimate question, the one you listeners are probably asking right now, is did the strikes actually work? Did they stop Iran from getting a bomb?
The INSS paper concludes that because of these strikes, Iran was no longer a nuclear threshold state.
Let's define threshold state.
A threshold state is one that can enrich enough weapons-grade uranium for a single bomb within a couple of weeks of making the political decision to do so.
Okay.
The strikes pushed that breakout timeline back by at least 1 to 2 years. So in a purely tactical sense, Operation Rising Lion achieved its immediate objective.
Wait, but if they hit Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan, how is it only pushed back 1 to 2 years? Why isn't the program completely dead?
Because they didn't get everything.
Right.
The paper highlights that Iran retains residual knowledge. You can't bomb physics out of a scientist's head. And crucially, a hidden stockpile of 408 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium.
408 kilograms. That survived.
Senior intelligence officials believe this material survived because it was buried in deep, undisclosed subterranean locations.
So the physical capability is crippled, but the material is still out there, and that brings up the psychological shift. The INSS paper dives into Iran's strategic dilemma post-strikes, and it brings up the Libya versus North Korea model.
This is where deterrence theory gets incredibly dark.
Yeah, walk us through that.
Within Iran, the hardliners looked at the smoking ruins of Natanz and Fordo and drew a very specific, terrifying lesson. They argued that the strikes proved their previous deterrence strategy had completely failed.
The previous strategy being proxy militias in Lebanon and Yemen and conventional ballistic missiles.
Exactly. It didn't stop American bunker busters. So they looked to history. They look at Muammar Gaddafi in Libya.
Right.
In 2003, Gaddafi agreed to fully dismantle his nuclear program to appease the West and rejoin the international community. A few years later, the West supported a domestic rebellion that overthrew and brutally killed him.
A glaring cautionary tale for any authoritarian regime.
Now, contrast Gaddafi with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. North Korea defied the entire world, suffered through crippling sanctions, but successfully tested and built a functional nuclear arsenal.
And today,
the Kim regime survives, completely immune to the kind of preemptive conventional strikes Iran just suffered, because the cost of attacking a nuclear-armed Pyongyang is unacceptably high.
So the hardliners in Tehran are sitting in the rubble saying, we tried staying on the threshold. We tried playing the diplomatic game. We offered 3.67% enrichment in Oman.
No, we got bombed anyway.
And we got bombed anyway. So their conclusion is the only true insurance policy in this world is an actual functional nuclear warhead mounted on an ICBM.
The INSS assessment warns of a volatile paradox here. While the strikes degraded Iran's physical ability to build a bomb, they may have actually supercharged their motivation to covertly build one.
By proving that conventional deterrence doesn't work.
Yes. The U.S. and Israel may have inadvertently guaranteed Iran's total, unyielding commitment to acquiring the ultimate weapon to ensure the regime's survival.
Which sets the stage for a deeply unstable winter. We are going to fast forward through the rest of 2025 and jump into early 2026.
Things escalate quickly here.
Very quickly. Inside Iran, the situation is boiling over. Massive nationwide protests are rocking the country, fueled by the economic devastation of the war, the ongoing sanctions, and the rolling blackouts. The regime is fighting for its life against its own citizens.
And yet, somehow, diplomatic talks resume in Geneva and Oman.
It's a surreal environment. You have diplomats in tailored suits sitting in European capitals discussing sanctions relief, while the military reality on the ground in the Middle East is rapidly spiraling toward absolute war.
The military posturing is staggering. In early 2026, the U.S. gathers the most air power in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq.
They send a second nuclear-powered aircraft carrier to the Persian Gulf. They erect Patriot missile batteries across Qatar and the UAE. It's a massive armada just sitting off the coast.
And Iran is heavily preparing its defenses too. They import massive amounts of solid-fuel missile components from China, allowing them to launch retaliatory strikes much faster than older liquid-fueled rockets.
Right.
They also reportedly deploy the Chinese YLC-8B radar system. It's a massive mobile UHF-band 3D long-range radar.
Why is that specific radar important? I mean, why highlight that one?
Because UHF band radar is specifically designed to detect stealth aircraft. Traditional high-frequency radars struggle to see the angles on an F-35 or a B-2 bomber, but lower frequency waves can detect the broader shape of the aircraft. Deploying the YLC-8B was a clear signal to Washington.
We see your stealth fighters, and we are preparing to shoot them down.
Exactly.
There's a massive economic defensive move, too. In early 2026, Iran speed loads 20 million barrels of oil into tankers in just 6 days.
20 million barrels.
Imagine the frantic logistics of that. Pipelines pumping at maximum capacity, ships rotating through the terminals around the clock. They know their oil infrastructure is about to be targeted.
So they're trying to get as much product out onto the open water as possible before the cruise missiles arrive.
Both sides are fully armed, locked in a standoff, and the diplomatic talks, which were supposed to be the off-ramp, completely break down.
Let's look at that breakdown in February 2026. The U.S. delegation, which now includes Special Envoy Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and CNTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper, leaves the talks in Geneva.
They publicly state that a deal is difficult, if not impossible.
And the fatal blow came on February 17, 2026. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei gave a national speech where he firmly and unequivocally rejected the U.S. conditions for a peace agreement.
He didn't just reject the terms, right? He made it deeply personal.
Very personal. He declared that Trump was incapable of deposing the Islamic Republic, and he explicitly threatened that the United States Navy could be sunk.
You don't threaten to sink American aircraft carriers unless you are prepared for the immediate consequences.
And they arrived quickly.
Trump issues a final ultimatum. Iran has 10 to 14 days to reach a deal, or the U.S. will attack. The clock starts ticking.
The countdown.
By February 27, a day before the strikes begin, foreign embassies are frantically evacuating from Tehran. The U.S. State Department declares Iran a state sponsor of wrongful detention. Italy issues an emergency alert urging its citizens to flee the country immediately.
The tension for anyone watching this unfold must have been completely suffocating.
And on February 28, the campaign begins.
It does.
We are now looking directly at the live news blog from The Guardian, dated March 1st, 2026. This gives us a chilling, minute-by-minute window into the chaos as it unfolded.
A massive, coordinated U.S. and Israeli strike begins. Trump announces the campaign will take 4 weeks.
4 weeks. A 4-week sustained bombing campaign against a mountainous nation the size of Iran is a monumental military undertaking.
It indicated this wasn't going to be a surgical, limited strike to degrade centrifuges like the 12-Day War. This was designed to be systemic, overwhelming, and devastating to the state apparatus.
I want to walk through some visceral details from this live blog because it puts you right there on the ground as the world was waking up to this new reality.
It's important to visualize this.
First, the human cost to the U.S. forces. U.S. Central Command CNTCOM reports 3 American service members killed in action and 5 seriously wounded.
This wasn't a sterile push-button war fought from Nevada. American blood was spilled immediately.
Right. Second, Trump claims that the U.S. destroyed Iran's naval headquarters and literally sank 9 Iranian ships, sending them to the bottom of the sea.
A massive naval blow.
Third, Iran tries to make good on Khamenei's threat. They claim to target the USS Abraham Lincoln with ballistic missiles. CNTCOM confirms missiles were launched, but says they didn't come close to the carrier.
But the fact that they tried to sink a nuclear-powered supercarrier housing 5,000 American sailors is a massive escalation. It shows they were entirely past the point of signaling. They were trying to inflict mass casualties.
And the conflict instantly spilled over Iran's borders. The live blog notes that a French naval base in Abu Dhabi was hit by drone strikes.
Which leads to one of the most surreal, darkly absurd anecdotes in the entire source stack.
Yeah, think about the civilians caught in the crossfire. There's an entry in the blog about German tourists on a cruise liner called the Mein Schiff 4.
They are on a luxury 7-day Magic of the Orient cruise, docked in Abu Dhabi.
Right. Suddenly, they get emergency alerts on their phones. They are herded into the ship's interior theater, cowering in fear in their vacation clothes, as explosions from Iranian drones rock the harbor right outside their balconies.
It perfectly encapsulates the bizarre nature of modern global conflict. The juxtaposition of sipping a piña colada on a luxury vacation while a geopolitical war kicks off next door.
The illusion of safety evaporates in an instant.
That all of these events, as chaotic and violent as they were entirely overshadowed by the climax of the March 1st strikes, the headline that fundamentally altered the trajectory of the Middle East.
The decapitation strike.
The decapitation strike.
The live blog confirms the most significant casualty of the campaign. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, has been killed in the strikes.
Unprecedented.
And he wasn't alone. The strikes also killed the defense minister Aziz Nasrizzadeh, former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Ground Forces Mohammad Pakpour, and roughly 45 other top military and political leaders.
It was a total, absolute wipeout of the upper echelon of the Iranian state in a single night.
This brings us right back to the July 2025 INSS policy paper. Remember their analysis of deterrence.
The INSS analysts wrote that the only way to truly deter Iran from sprinting toward a nuclear weapon was to establish a credible threat to the very survival of the regime.
They argued that Iranian authorities had to believe that breaking out to a bomb would trigger direct attacks on the regime's symbols and ultimate stability.
But the US and Israel didn't just threaten the regime. In March 2026, they followed through and fundamentally erased it. They eliminated the sovereign, the top military commanders, and the political leadership in one massive blow.
Which forces us to confront a terrifying unknown. From a tactical standpoint, you have eliminated the architects of Iran's strategy. But strategically, you've also eliminated the very people who had the authority to negotiate a surrender, command the proxy militias to stand down, or enforce a ceasefire.
Exactly. That profound uncertainty leads us perfectly into the final section of our sources. The sociological essay that analyzes the impact of assassinating a supreme leader. Because this isn't just about military tactics, it's about the soul of a nation.
We have to understand the unique position of the supreme leader in Iran. He is not just a politician, like a prime minister or a president who can be swapped out after an election.
No, he is the ultimate religious authority. The Velayat-e Faqih, the representative of God on earth within the framework of the Islamic Republic's ideology.
Right.
Therefore, assassinating him is not interpreted by the Iranian populace as a mere tactical military maneuver. It is perceived as a direct attack on their sovereignty, their religion, and their deeply held national identity.
The essay points out that an act like this activates a collective national trauma. It ties directly back to historical wounds that are still very fresh in the Iranian psyche.
You have to look at 1953.
Right, when the CIA and British intelligence orchestrated a coup to overthrow Iran's democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh.
Simply because he wanted to nationalize Iranian oil.
That event planted a deep generational distrust of Western intervention. And more recently, the 2020 U.S. drone strike that killed General Qasem Soleimani.
The Soleimani assassination is an excellent parallel. When he was killed, it triggered massive outpourings of grief and anger. even among Iranians who fiercely oppose the regime's domestic policies.
It activated what sociologists call in-group cohesion.
Right. It's that classic rally round the flag effect. Even Iranians who hated the regime suddenly felt this deep, visceral need to unite because their national identity was under attack by an outsider.
The essay argues that killing the supreme leader multiplies that effect exponentially. It inflicts a symbolic trauma that forces a fractured protesting society to temporarily unite in shared grief and a demand for retribution.
So if a wounded, traumatized nation of 88 million people rallies around the flag, what does that mean for the rest of us? The essay directly addresses the fear that's probably keeping you awake at night. Does this decapitation strike mean World War III?
It's the most critical question in the source material, and the essay works to debunk the myth of the automatic switch.
There is a popular misconception that global war is like a tripwire. You cross a certain line, like killing a head of state, and suddenly all the global powers are automatically at war, like the cascade of alliances at the start of World War I.
But modern geopolitics relies on cumulative escalation, not automatic switches.
Explain that dynamic, because the essay talks about a tug-of-war between group polarization and restraining forces.
Group polarization is the psychological phenomenon where, in a crisis, a society's moderate voices are silenced or radicalized, and the group as a whole is pushed to extreme positions.
So in Iran, the surviving hardliners and the Revolutionary Guard will demand total unrestrained revenge for Khamenei's death.
And in the US and Israel, hawkish factions will demand total victory and regime change now that the leadership is crippled.
The polarization pushes everyone's domestic politics toward maximum conflict.
But there's friction pushing back against that slide into the abyss.
Yes, the restraining forces. The essay outlines three major ones keeping the world from going over the edge. First, nuclear deterrence. Even if Iran doesn't have a functional bomb yet, the overarching fear of drawing in global nuclear powers like Russia or China acts as a massive brake on escalation.
What's the second?
Second is war fatigue. The populations in the US and the West are deeply weary of prolonged Middle Eastern conflicts. There is intense domestic pressure on Western leaders to avoid another decades-long quagmire like Iraq or Afghanistan.
And the third one is the wallet. Economic interdependence. A full-scale regional war would close the Strait of Hormuz.
Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through that narrow waterway.
If it closes, global energy prices spike overnight, supply chains freeze, and you crash the world economy. The global powers, specifically China, which relies heavily on that oil, have a massive vested interest in forcing a halt to the hostilities before the global economy burns down.
But as the essay critically notes, the biggest threat to those restraining forces isn't a deliberate, rational decision by a leader to start World War III. It's miscalculation. And that brings us to the role of information warfare.
We are operating in the modern digital era. The essay emphasizes that rumors, panic, and deepfakes travel infinitely faster than ballistic missiles.
During the fog of the decapitation strike, social media was undoubtedly flooded with conflicting reports, fake retaliatory strikes, manipulated videos of leaders, and bot networks amplifying panic.
When information itself becomes a battlefield, leaders are forced to make life or death decisions based on a fractured, highly distorted reality.
Miscalculation is the greatest threat to global stability right now. If a radar operator misreads a civilian airliner for a bomber, or a leader overreacts to a fake viral report of a chemical attack, that's how the situation spirals past the restraining forces and into an unstoppable global conflict.
The ultimate danger isn't just the weapons being fired, it's the flawed human perception of the crisis as it unfolds in real time.
Which brings us to the end of this incredible, frankly terrifying journey through our source stack.
Let's briefly recap what we've unpacked today. We started in the spring of 2025 with Trump's harsh ultimatum and a 60-day deadline. We watched the grueling shuttle diplomacy in Oman fail as demands shifted and trust collapsed over the Rainbow Site and the naming of the Persian Gulf.
We analyzed the surgical, devastating strikes of the 12-day war, which set Iran's physical nuclear program back, but paradoxically supercharged their psychological motivation to build a bomb.
We saw the massive military buildup and the breakdown of final talks in Geneva in early 2026. And finally, we walked through the surreal real-time chaos of March 1st, 2026, ending with the historic, regime-shattering decapitation strikes that killed Supreme Leader Khamenei and reshaped the geopolitical landscape.
As we conclude, I want to reiterate our impartiality disclaimer. The events we have discussed today involve profound violence, deeply entrenched political divides, and world-altering decisions made by leaders across the U.S., Israel, Iran, and the globe. We do not endorse any of the viewpoints, the leaders, or the military actions discussed in this deep dive. Our sole purpose has been to impartially navigate and synthesize the complex source material to give you, the listener, a clear, factual understanding of the events on the ground.
And as you process all of this, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over on your own. We talked extensively about the INS Papers argument that the ultimate deterrent against a nation breaking out to a nuclear weapon is threatening that regime's very survival.
It's a clean, logical theory on paper.
It is. But when you actually follow through on that threat, when you drop the bunker busters and assassinate the sovereign religious symbol of a nation, what happens to the rules of deterrence?
If a regime is decapitated and no longer exists as it once did, who is actually left to be deterred?
And perhaps more terrifyingly, what replaces the void they leave behind in a region already on fire?
It is a question that the history books are writing the answer to right now.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time.